by myself. Hello. There you go. If you can just put your name right there. We have some materials. Hello, Miss Hadash. So how's Lane doing?
He's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing really good this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, much better now that we've got everything assessed and on the table. So yeah, he's doing really good. But Harper, she's my
Kindergartner.
kindergartner. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yes. Trust me.
Younger
Get it.
kids, or-
It's for all ages.
Yeah.
Okay. It's
Mhm.
kind of the same, yeah.
Yeah. We have it's for the whole feeder, so Annie. Get this. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna fix that.
No, really, mainly my 6th grader, but
I feel like it's the second ones. Like
mine's my first.
your first? Oh,
My second one's
I hear a lot about this. See, and you had a first one, Strongwilled, and you still had another one.
Hopefully it couldn't happen twice. That was kind of my theory.
Well, I read an article where one lady was saying she has 3 strong-willed children. And I was like, oh, how is she surviving? All right, well, welcome to all the parents who are in the auditorium with us, and for those who are live streaming, welcome to you as well. My name is Kelly Locke, and I'm the mental health specialist for the district. So my position was created this summer. We have a really great school board who decided we needed to start providing some trainings to parents, staff, and students regarding mental health. What can we do? Just how do we get information out and how do we help our families? So we polled, and I say we, I didn't really do the work. It was Lydia Joyner, who's the lead counselor here at Conroe High. She polled the Conroe feeder parents and said, what kind of presentation would you like? What's important to you? And it was asked for the strong-willed child. So I really feel like, though, we should all be here for a support group, because if we all have strong-willed children, some days we're just surviving, because I have one at home, and I describe her as my passionate child, but she really tests my parenting skills. And sometimes I do really well and I'm proud of myself. I remember all the skills that I've learned, and other times I don't do so well. So yeah, everyone's in the same boat. So a little bit about myself. It's a little bit about my background, but I have been a school counselor at all grade levels, from seniors in high school all the way down to pre-K. So I've kind of seen a lot of different ages. Well, we got some handouts. Yeah, no worries. It's informal here. Just grab what you need. So, just kind of looking at it, we don't have to, say it out loud, but we know our children. And so do any of these describe your child? Do they seem revved up a lot of the time? Do they have meltdowns over minor frustrations? Full-blown rages? Irritable when it's told it's time to stop playing video games or get off electronic devices? Do they have trouble making eye contact after being on screens or in general? Do they have trouble making or keeping friends because of immature behavior? Do they seem wired and tired at the same time, like they're exhausted and they can't sleep? Okay. Do they seem lazy or unmotivated and have poor attention to detail? Okay. Do they become increasingly oppositional, defiant, and disorganized? And have any pediatricians or therapists or anyone in your child's life stated something like their behavior looks like bipolar or depression, ADHD, anxiety, but there's not a family history of it? And then would you describe your child as stressed despite having really little to no stressors in life? And so if you said, yes, that describes my child, this is actually not the strong-willed child. And the reason that I say that is because I work with parents all the time that will talk about the strong-willed child, and they'll work really hard to implement all of the things, and it's not working. So the things that I've found through my research, that it's either not really being done to fidelity, meaning that life gets in the way and maybe we really don't do those ideas that we know for the strong-willed child, or there is something called electronic screen syndrome. So if you're like, that was my child right there, you may want to look into resetting your child's brain. There's a huge issue right now with the connection between electronics and behavior, and it's masking a lot of mental health diagnoses, and kids are getting misdiagnosed with behavior problems over and over again, but a digital detox, and it's like a whole new child. So I'd hate for you to put in all of the things we're about to talk about and exhaust yourself fighting a losing battle. Because if it is connected to screens, all of the great parenting techniques, they might help, but they're not going to reset your child's brain. So there's a lot of research on just kind of what technology is doing and how it's changing our kids' brains. So I just had to say that because I don't want to set anyone up to leave here and go, none of those things worked, and why am I still having trouble? So now we will talk about the strong-willed child. So do they have anger outbursts? So strong-willed children are described as intense, passionate. That's what I call my child. She's passionate, right? They're just like all-in type personalities. That's kind of your strong-willed child. Do they have a low frustration tolerance? Do little things set them off? Do they struggle with anger and socially appropriate behavior? Are they stomping their feet? Are they throwing themselves on the ground? Are they yelling? That's kind of one sign of it. Do they demand to know why? And if you say things like just because or I don't know, are they not satisfied? And you'll even see this at a young age, because even starting at the age of 2, my strong-willed child, when she'd ask me a question and she comes up with some really difficult questions. And if I said, I don't know, she would say, don't say I don't know, talk to me. So like they will demand an answer, and I don't know is not acceptable, right? And so,
My daughter gets mad when I say,
oh yeah, no, talk to me. Yeah, speak. That is a strong-willed child right there. And they will why you to death. Why? And they just want to understand. Some of those questions are really hard to answer, or some of them you're just like kind of exhausted going down to the whys. And one time there was a question and we got to the end and it's like, well, it's just created that way. And I was like, that should end it, right? And she was like, but why? Okay, like that's hard. And so people will say like, oh, she's really curious, and yeah, she is, and I want to help develop that, but sometimes it's like even the littlest thing, can you put your socks on? Why? Because we need to go outside. Why? And all of those things. But it does make you kind of question yourself, because there's been a couple of times when I'm like, I don't know why. I asked you to do it, and honestly, I don't know why I asked you to do it. It just kind of seemed like the logical thing. So sometimes I can kind of bend a little bit with her, because if I can't come up with an answer why, then I'm like, well, probably shouldn't have asked you to do that, right? Do they argue forever? They can hold out longer than we can as parents, and they have more energy than we do. And so that is another characteristic. Are they bossy? So my strong-willed child we've taught her to say, may I please have this? But most of the time it's like, get me this, I want that. And that's just the first thing that comes out. And she doesn't even realize it's not even when she's upset. And so we have to kind of go back and practice. What's a better way of asking for that? Because they like to say, give me that. And then they like to tell their peers what to do as well. So sometimes that can be conflicts with relationships, friendships. Friends are like, well, I don't want to hang out with them. They're always telling me what to do, right? Siblings can be like that, especially if they have a very passive sibling who kind of goes along with them. In the house, they think that that's what everyone's going to do, and then they hit school and they struggle because not everyone's doing what my sibling would do. Do they just dig their heels in and flat out refuse to do things they don't want to do? And now you're at a battle of wills, because it's like, I can't force you to, and it's even some of the littlest things, and you're just like, it's not that big of a deal, but they just will hold strong because they don't want to do it. So they're impatient. They just don't like to take turns. They don't like to wait for things, and they want it now, right? They make their own rules, and they're not really interested in the opinions that other people have. Like, they believe their rules are the right way. So they kind of can buck the system a little bit, especially if we don't have an answer as to why rules are put in. So in the classroom, these kids can be difficult because maybe the teacher's not the one who created the rule, and they really don't know why a rule was created. But there's probably a reason, so sometimes kids can struggle with that if the teacher can't tell them why. Do they insist on getting what they think they deserve? So my oldest child just did an activity on needs and wants, and she could very nicely put needs here, wants here, but then when my strong-willed child was involved in that conversation, everything was a need. She could not separate the needs and the wants. It just didn't quite. And some of that's developmental, but I could see it even as she gets older for things, because everything is, I need it and I need it now. No, you don't need that toy, or you don't need an ice cream or a popsicle, whatever it is. Do they ignore those warnings that they don't want to hear? They seem like they have that selective hearing. You're like, I know you're hearing me right now, but they just kind of act like they didn't hear you, right? And then do they move at their own pace? Are they really fast to do things they want to do, but then move at a snail's pace when it's something they don't want to do or that you ask them to do? So that is your strong-willed child. So I saw some of you like nodding your head. It's like, let's see, this should be a support group, because we're kind of all feeling each other and going, yes, we're making it through this together with these strong-willed children. So what sets them off? And you have a sheet here, and it's different types of parenting. So what sets them off is this one down here, the my way or the highway kind of parent. The high rules with high expectations, but no discussion about it, and then not really concerned about how the child feels. And a strong-willed child wants to be heard, and needs to be validated, right? But if that's not something that we foster in them, and then, according to Madeline Levine, she said those are the kids with those type of parents who can have a tendency to end up being bullied. But so phrases like, you'll do as I say, or just because I said so, all of those, you are going to set them off if you use those terms. I mean, those are like fighting words. They're like ready to go when they hear that. So instead of saying because I said so or you'll do as I say, you can say things like, I give you a lot of freedom to make choices, but I love you too much to let you get away with this, and I'm not backing down. So you're validating them, but you're also standing firm in what you say. So it's just a way of rephrasing how we talk. And it takes practice, and sometimes even with me, I practice it a lot, and I still slip up and revert back to, and one time I was in the backyard and I got to the point I was like, just because mommy said so, that is the answer, So we all have those days where we fall back into those because I said so. Anything they feel it's a lack of respect. So if they're just being told, so they kind of see themselves a little higher than most kids, more like kind of a peer to a parent is kind of where they're coming from. And so anything that get your stuff off the table, move your stuff, again, those are fighting words. And so saying things like, would you please clear your homework away, or I need the table to be cleared, or even the choices, do you want to clear your stuff off the table before or after dinner? Well, you have to eat dinner on the table, but you get what I mean. And they do not like to be treated like they're dumb. And we might not even realize that that's how it is, because they are pretty sensitive kids. So just telling them things like, you forgot to do something, take care of it now, can set them off and make them feel like they're dumb, like they're incapable of remembering to empty the dishwasher. And so things like, I noticed you've been forgetting to empty the dishwasher lately. We need to make a plan to make sure it gets done. And I'd like to hear your ideas over dinner. So just listening to them will help de-escalate them if they feel like they have a say in it. Doesn't mean you're going to 100% go with everything they say, but that'll help kind of de-escalate. So again, what works with them? Acknowledging their feelings. I can see that you're upset right now, and we can't go to the park right now, but avoiding things like you're being dramatic, it's not that big a deal, or the one where we always say, when they say it's not fair, and we go, life's not fair, right? That's a trigger. That'll set them off because they don't understand that. Or it's not a big deal, because to them it is a big deal. And it kind of goes back to the calling them dumb when we say things like, it's not a big deal, get over it, it's just high school. It's just junior high, it won't matter, right? We see that as adults, and we realize that high school is just a small part, but to them it's their whole world, so that kind of makes them feel dumb. But when they feel heard and understood, so just validating what you see. Again, you're not giving in to anything. You didn't change your mind and go to the park. You just said, I can see that you're upset about that, But they don't have to get into that battle to prove to you how bad. So when we minimize it and we say, well, it's not that bad, then they're taking that on as a challenge to show you how bad they feel, right? So just acknowledging that you feel pretty bad, And then provide a brief explanation. So explaining the whys behind decisions can go a long way. They just want to know why, and a lot of times if they know the why, then they're like, okay. They just kind of feel comforted in the fact that it wasn't just a decision that was made to ruin their life, because that's what they think, right? But just giving them those explanations, and if they get to the point where they're still getting you on that why, and you've given a thorough explanation, you can just get to that point where you say, asked and answered. You asked, I answered that. So you're validating, I heard you, you asked, and I already answered it. So you don't have to keep repeating yourself over and over and over again. And after a while, if they learn that you're just going to say asked and answered, then they don't come back for those. They know what the answer is going to be, right? And this one is so hard with the strong-willed child. The one warning and then follow through, because sometimes it's just easier to keep the peace in the home. And there are some evenings when I'm like, I know exactly how to make her happy, and our whole night would be so peaceful. But then I think, well, what is that teaching her for the future? And so then we have to go into the battle, which sometimes does ruin dinner time and ruin a lot of things because we're in that learning phase. So just making sure you're going to follow through, or else they learn who they can manipulate. And they think, well, you're not really going to follow through. So if I know that Mom, she takes 5 times for me to push, that's easy. I'll push her 5 times and then I get my way. It's kind of that thing we see in the grocery store. Mom, I want a toy. No. And you can just sit back and watch people. That's what I do. But I want a toy. Fine, you get it. Now stop complaining. Well, they just won. And they learn nothing from that except for where your limit is. So they are really good at pushing us to that limit, and we just have to hold strong on it, right? And then some negative consequences can work if you figure out what they care about. There's a lot of times with strong-willed kids, it takes, some parents were like, well, I take away their cell phone and they don't care. I'm like, well, because they've decided they can live without a cell phone. So if you're gonna do those negative consequences, that's fine. It just has to be something that gets them. Like, what is it? If they're older, is it their car? Or when they're younger, is it a sporting activity? Like, what is it that's going to get them? Because if you're putting these negative consequences in and it's not shaping the behavior, then they really deep down don't care about that. They can live without it, is what they're telling you. So just kind of watch those. You know, and just following through, like if you hit the table, you'll have to take a break, or whatever your terminology is. If you call it timeout or take a break, or I've heard people say they call it brain breaks, whatever it is. So when they're bossy, we do this all the time. When she's bossy, I'm like, would you like to try that again? But you know, so often it's just easier to give them what they're asking for, and not, because it takes time to have them go back. But we've gotten to the point now where I'll say, can you try that again? And she'll go into, may I please? You know, she does it dragging her feet, but she does it. And then that just is letting them know that this is not an okay way to say it, right? And then also working on empathy with them, with that bossiness, especially with younger elementary kids of, well, how do you think your friends feel when you're constantly, if you're talking to us this way, you're probably talking to them at school that way too. You know, do you think this could be some of the issues that you have with your friends, depending on the age? Offering choices. Sometimes this gets hard. I have to stop and think about what choices I'm going to give, but making sure there are 2 choices that you can live with. So if it's picking shoes up, instead of saying, get your shoes out of the front entryway, something I say a lot, say, you know, would you like to pick them up now or after you play outside? Either one I can live with, as long as those shoes are picked up. So just giving them those choices are gonna they think, okay, I'm in control, then they don't fight back at it. But sometimes you do have to stop and think about choices, because it can be difficult on them. And then encourage the problem solving for impatience. Don't solve that impatient problem, because that is a lifelong skill they have to learn. We have to wait in a doctor's office, and it is boring. We have to wait in line. But if they're constantly, I don't want to wait, and so lines are avoided for them when they're younger, or mom just takes care of everything, they don't learn that skill, and then they do struggle in school when it comes to waiting for things and waiting in line. So if you know that that's a thing that's going to set them off, being at the doctor's office and having to wait, you know, talk to them about it before. What would you like to bring? So that, you know, you're going to be bored, so what is it that you would like? And then avoiding too many rules. So we don't have to have that whole big long list where it rolls on the floor of all the rules that we have in our house. So just sticking to the ones that you have to have. What can you not live without? Because some things we can give up, and one of them is the jacket. And I put that on there because we go through the struggle all the time. You know, I'm like, but ultimately, yes, I want my child to wear their jacket, especially when it's 30 degrees outside, but they're probably gonna learn a better lesson if I just let go of my control as a mom and say, sure, go right on outside without that jacket. Let's go to school. And then when they're sitting there shivering, or they have to miss active start or whatever it is for elementary, that's a big deal. If they don't have their jacket, their teacher might not let them go to active start, and then that's the natural consequence. They learn it, but just avoid doing what I want to do sometimes is the I told you so. When my child comes home, mommy, you know, and tells me something, and I want to say I told you so. Like, didn't mommy tell you that this morning? And they're like, that's just going to undo everything, you know. So I just take that in my head, and maybe I have to tell it to my husband later. See, I told her. I am right. But they are experiential learners. So if you tell them that jumping off a couch can hurt them, they won't believe you until they jump off. And more often than not, they're going to do it right after just to test that theory. So we were at some friend's house, and they had a retaining wall. And I said, you know, you can't get on the retaining wall. The rule is you can't get on there because you could fall off and hurt yourself. And so my strong-willed child positioned herself on that retaining wall right behind my back. So I was facing this way back, and we had friends that said, I just watched her. She climbed up there and looked at it and just like face planted off of it. She didn't get back up on that retaining wall. I probably would have stopped her had I seen it. So it's kind of a good thing she learned that natural consequence that, yeah, I said you would fall and it would hurt, and it hurt her. and we had to clean her up, and she was all muddy, but that natural consequence, she learned it. But so often I've told her to not get on the couch or not climb on things. I turn around and that's exactly what she's doing. So as they get older, of course the examples change, but anything that we're going to tell them not to do, they're going to try to experience it. So when we get too strict on those rules, that's when they push back and they want to try it. So they'll test it. If you tell them not to do something because of this, they're going to want to try that. So, and then avoid the power struggles. So first then works good. It's a little harder to start implementing this with the high school kid. I don't know, try it. I've never tried the theory of starting it, but it works really well for elementary and younger is first then. First you do your work, then you go outside, whatever it is, a preferred activity. And it could, I guess it could work for high school too, to say first you get your homework done, then you go hang out with friends. And so everything is first then, and you're putting it in a choice for them. And I heard it a lot, and this was a technique that was given to teachers, and I was given it years ago to use it in the classroom, and I was like, I don't know, really, would it really work? But for my strong-willed child, like sometimes she'll just go, okay. I'm like, wait, what? Just because I put it in that first then thing, you know, and so I didn't tell her she had to do her work. I just said, first you're gonna do this, then you'll do that. And we just keep repeating that over and over again. Whatever it is. And so, you know, we talked about those consequences. Again, it has to be something that hits them hard. So you can't use that consequence, a negative consequence, very often. So, you know, rewards. So one thing that we do is like, even for tablet time, you know, all the time, can I play on my tablet? Can I play on my tablet? I want to, you know, you might hear with older ones about video games. They want to be on video games. And so you can kind of see how bad they want to do it because I started putting time limits. Like, sure, cleaning this part of your room gets you 10 minutes. Oh, well, I don't want it that bad. And there you go, power struggle's over, you know. So there's things that you can do there. And then it's allowing privileges without them feeling punished because, like, okay, like, they didn't get what they wanted, but it's not a punishment that you're putting in. It's something that they're choosing. So you're taking that battle away. And the big thing is stick to your word. And that is so hard because the strong-willed kids make you just want to give in. And it would be so much easier. So really what the research has shown us is that kind of as our world gets busier and as we have more and more two-parent households that are working or even single parents. So working parents, we see the evenings and weekends as our peaceful time. And so we'll do anything to keep the peace because it's like, I just want to enjoy my child. I only get this limited time with them, so I want to enjoy them. So we do things that would pacify them or give them what they want just because we want a peaceful time with them. And it's like, I really don't want to go to battle with my kid tonight. Like, can't we just watch a movie and it be fine? Can't we just play a game? And so we give into those things and we kind of let a lot of it slide in order to keep the peace. But really, they have to know that you mean what you say and you say what you mean, and that hits their inner core of trust. Because if you are someone who, well, I told you to do it, but I really didn't mean it because I'm going to give in, deep down inside, they're like, I don't know. They may not be able to verbalize it, but they're really thinking, can I trust? Can I trust my mom? Because she says this here, but then really, she doesn't hold to that. So what can I trust? And it puts them in this like inner struggle inside. And sometimes you can have behavior issues come out of that because they're going, this person who's supposed to protect me, I can manipulate them. How do I trust that they can protect me all the time? So as hard as it is to stick to your word, and parents will judge you. Other parents will judge you. Like on Facebook, in Target, everywhere you go, they will tell you, you don't care about your child enough. You don't love your child enough. If you loved your child, you'd give them everything you want, you know. But we've seen what happens there, you know. And then I just kind of sit back and listen, and I just wonder, like, okay, so how many parenting classes have you taken? Or, you know, what research have you done? I don't really ask them that, but I think that, like, when they're starting to come out and judge with it, parenting is hard. No one should be judging anyone else because we should just be, like I said, a support group for everybody. And then making the expectations clear. So wherever it is that you're going, making sure they know the boundary lines. That's hard in all situations, but in most that you can't, what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior, and talking about that ahead of time. Because again, they're gonna try things because they're that experiential learner. So what are the consequences for breaking the rules of wherever it is that you're going? So if you're going to the zoo and you need them to stay right there with you because you can lose them very easily in the zoo for the little ones, or even whatever it is, if you're going on vacation and you have a teenager, and what are the rules for that? So setting those up ahead of time can be helpful. So there is good that comes from a strong-willed child if we can survive it. There's really good, and there's a lot of things. So all the positives that come from it, they actually grow up to be higher income earners. If we can do our job as parents, and we can kind of, what they say is you form that strong will and send it in a positive direction without crushing their will. And a lot of times when we're the my way or the highway people, we just crush that will, and strong-willed kids have a tendency to lose it. But if we can survive it as parents, then they're entrepreneurs. They're more likely to become millionaires than the class valedictorian, so just kind of know that. So they will become successful in life in a way that they can set their own journey, and sometimes that's not school, because in school someone else is telling me what I need to do. So that's why they start their own business. They have great leadership skills, right? And they're not afraid to stand up for things they believe in. So that's pretty good, because sometimes we don't realize that even in school, some of the things that they get in trouble for, some of the times they're standing up for what they believe in. We have to help them if what their cause is that they're standing up for is a good cause, but they will. And then they're willing to do the right thing at all costs. So they're less likely to be swayed by peer pressure, because they will do the right thing, what they believe is the right thing. So our job as a parent is making sure they understand what that right thing is, and not letting them develop that primarily on their own. But it can be an amazing adventure. I mean, I always say that my strong-willed child, she's exhausting, but then I love her. She stretches me as a person, because sometimes I can be very controlling and I like things in a certain way, and she stretches me, and I think we benefit each other. I'm not saying we don't have our issues, but I think she's made me a better parent. To go, I don't have to control everything. So I kind of feel sorry for the other one, because I was a little more controlling, right? And then there's self-motivated teens and inner-directed. Self-motivated, though, even as teenagers, if you're like, well, my strong-willed is not motivated, they could be just motivated in what they think. It might not be what we think traditionally, and it might not always be school. And then again, peer pressure is not an issue for them. They don't fall to that, and they can stand up for themselves. So there are good things that come from it. But this quote struck me when I was reading it. It says, so morality is doing what's right no matter what you're told. So that is a strong-willed kid. But what do we want all the time? Obedience. And obedience is doing what you're told no matter what's right. So when we fight for obedience in our kids, then they'll start giving obedience to everyone, and they'll never push back. The problem with that is what happens if that person turns into someone who's leading them in the wrong way. So those kids that we force obedience on are more likely to be the followers and not the leaders. So we've got to really watch that. They will follow what everyone else does, even if the person is telling them to do something that's wrong. So if we can survive these strong-willed children, then they can make it, and they can be successful there. So I love giving tips, things that you can walk away with, so you don't come to one presentation and then go, well, now what? So I found this great podcast. I love podcasts because they're free, right? And I don't have an Android device, but on my Apple, I just click the purple podcast button and everything's there. Is there one for Android? Does anyone have an Android? I only know Apple. It might be the same thing, right? So Dr. Robin Silverman, she's a child and parenting expert. She is so easy to listen to, and so she gets all of the world-renowned people, the authors of the books, and she interviews them. And so it helps me also decide what books I want to read and look into further, because if I listen to it and I'm like, oh no, that doesn't match up with my viewpoints, my value system, then I don't waste my time reading their book. But if it really hits home and I like what they say, then I go and get the book and read further. So it just kind of helps you vet the information. But there's tons there about positive discipline. There's some great techniques in positive discipline. Some I love, some I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. But it's good to question things, right? And then how to raise a confident, capable, and resilient adult. Isn't that what we all want? So on these things, you may not like every single thing that's said, but just pick and choose. Like, this works for me and my family. This other thing, I'm not quite sure if that works. That's what I do when I listen to them. And then that one there about how to cope with temper tantrums, I think I need to listen to that one again because they come. So a great one, and some of the resources that I gave you, like talking about choices, that's a big love and logic skill, and I do have some books for love and logic that we'll give away here at the end. But just the asked and answered, the way you respond to it, asked and answered is love and logic. So the thing about love and logic is just you always respond with love and logic. And logic means we stay self-regulated when these strong-willed children want to make us unregulated. They will raise it for us and they'll stress us out. So if you wanted to know the name of the book I showed you about the technology, Reset Your Child's Brain, that one's there. And then just the articles and all different research and things that I did in order to put this presentation together. Dr. Dobson has a lot of good stuff, love and logic, and then there's some focus on the family. So it's short and sweet for the strong-willed child. Not our lives, but how to parent them. Just, some little things that if we can just master these, then we can take it on. So are there any questions? Anything that I can answer or?
Does this child typically do well in school, or is that up for discussion? You don't really make a child, but
It's hard, and it really depends on the type of teacher that they have. Again, if they're fighting us because we like a lot of control, like I was that teacher in the classroom sometimes. I had my systems and I liked control. So sometimes I would have issues like with strong-willed kids because they wanted to push those systems. So it really depends on the teacher that they have and the techniques that they use. It doesn't mean that the other teacher is wrong. You can have very effective teachers who like their order and organization, but so it depends. So they might have a year where they're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then the next year, as they get older, teachers have to be a little more organized, and that's where they might struggle. So they're always going to be the ones that will question the rules. And when we have like those days where you have to read the handbook or talk to them about that, they're always going to question it, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes as educators, we need to remember to listen to them, but it can be hard sometimes because they push on it. So, questions? Yes?
How old is your strong-willed child?
Well, I have two. One, the one that I call passionate, she's 2. The other one is 5, but she's the passive-aggressive strong-willed child. So she's figured it out. I don't know which one's worse because she's figured out how to get everyone to like her, and then her strong will comes out. So some of those examples were from my little 2-year-old, and some of them were from the 5-year-old. For the 2-year-old, as soon as she could talk. Like this, what I was telling you, the example was when she says, don't say I don't know, talk to me. That started about at her 2nd birthday. And we're still doing it. We haven't even hit 3 yet. But she is, very verbal. So you can see it very young. There are some people who say that they can tell it even in their child. Like for her, she was rolling over the first time she did it. She was a month old. Like, so you see those things looking back, you're like, oh. Some of the things you can notice when they're little, but there are researchers who say you can tell a strong-willed child from very young.
She's 14 months old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And I saw the showing.
Yeah. Yeah. So my passive-aggressive strong-willed child, we thought we were good parents, but we didn't realize how she kind of ruled the roost until the other one came along. So we missed it because she looks like a pleaser, and I was like, I'm such a good parent, look at this. And then now we're hitting it where she's questioning things or pushing back on some of the rules. I asked her, we were going out in the country, and asked her to wear jeans, and she was like, but the last time we went, you didn't make me wear jeans. Leggings were acceptable. I was like, well, you didn't have jeans. And so my whole reasoning when she's, why do I have to wear jeans? Well, because you could get stickers. That wasn't, I mean, she was going to find the loophole. So those where they say the loopholes, they can be those sneaky, strong-willed kids too, because she will find a loophole, but she just does it real quietly and then goes, but, you know, and then it slams you. So I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, you can have both. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What's the opposite of a strong-willed child? What's that? Is it a passive child? Or a people pleaser or what?
Yeah, I mean, there's not,
I know you also, it seems like the strong-willed child is the one that you just struggles or what.
yeah,
And the one that's easy, oh, it's good, it's easy. But
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that you're reinforcing what
yeah.
in the right direction.
Sometimes the opposite is the obedient child. So they recognize just who's in authority and they'll always just be that obedient and people pleaser, exactly what you said. Like, I just want to make everyone happy. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes to make you happy. And there's lots of different combinations of it. I mean, there's not just like 2 kids, but yeah, I mean, I guess this polar opposites would be I do everything that I'm told no matter who it is, just because I want everyone to be happy, which they struggle because that's not possible, right? You can't make every single person happy. And then you've got the strong-willed child, you know, who doesn't care if you're happy. Like, I don't care if you're happy or not. So yeah, you've kind of got those. And then you've got some other ones in there too. Yeah, good question.
Going back to the podcast line.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. And I know they're small on the handout. I try to save trees. But you can just look even for Dr. Robin Silverman. She has a web page, which you could type that in. Sometimes I have to Google it to find the podcast if I'm on a new device because, you know, it's really weird, like different things. Is it at Dr. Robin or where is it? Like all of, even on Twitter, I had trouble the other day finding her on Twitter because it's a weird handle that's different from other things. So Google helps. But, and then even through her, there's other people who have podcasts that are connected, you know, that I look for. And so there's one of the people, it's at the bottom, it says Amy Morin, and she's a licensed psychologist. She is the author of the 13 things that I think it's like mentally strong people don't do, mentally strong parents don't do, and she's writing one that's like mentally strong women don't do. So she's an author. It's where I got a lot of stuff. She's got some good information. Yes, Miss Brown. Yeah.
Parents, because like you mentioned, are on the same page about how to deal with the different
Yes.
like, do you have any ideas? Because we don't always answer the same way, and she's already figured out
Yeah.
which one to go to for what.
Yeah. So I have that same thing. They know with Daddy, and a lot of it is just, you know, educating and just like talking about it. We took a Love and Logic class together, and just, okay, so we're hearing this information, you know, so if there's parenting classes out there, okay, so we're hearing it together. What does that mean for us? I mean, I can't say we're 100% on the same page on everything because he's still, I mean, he's a daddy and it's girls and he gives in a lot more. But on the flip side, sometimes I'm too controlling, so maybe it's a good balance. But yeah, a lot of it's just the discussion and like, okay, so well, let's talk about what do other people say? I think this way, you think that way. What do the experts who've been doing this for a while, what do they say? And sometimes, you know, even subtly, so when I'm getting ready in the morning, I'll put the podcast on and he's kind of waking up and he'll go, hey, I heard that podcast. You know, I didn't ask him to listen to it. Sometimes I'll directly send them to him and say, listen to this. But other times it's just kind of like it's on and you listen to it and like, well, what do you think about it? And so then that can open discussions. But yeah, it's hard because two people coming from separate ways that they were raised and now coming together and trying to raise a child. And yeah, so as much discussion as possible. And then I also have to look at myself and say, when do I need to give? Like the give and take. Because a lot of times I'll say, well, I know I've done the research, so I know what I'm saying is right. You know, and I have to remember, maybe I don't know everything. So, yeah.
She asked for something today. She talked to Dad about it.
Yeah.
She said, well, you're the boss. And I said, no, we're co-bosses.
Yeah.
And I'm a co-boss too. No, I'm co-boss.
Yeah. Yeah, because they see themselves right there like, yeah, so I'm the third one in this, right? So that is kind of the hard thing, though. And you made a really great point, because that strong-willed child can come between the parent because they see themselves as on that same playing field. And so you've got mommy, daddy, and then I'm right here with you. And so then it ends up being the three of you running the show. Oh, yeah. And yeah. So I think I was trying to count. How many did we have sign in total? 9. Oh, everybody gets to walk away with something. So, all right, I think we're finished with the broadcast. Thank you guys if you tuned in live streaming. Appreciate it, and have a great day.